The American Homebrewers Association has a special holiday promotion running now through December. Buy a 1-year prepaid membership gift card for $43 and choose a free gift to go along with it. You can buy the gift card for a fellow brewer or for yourself. The free gift options are Brewing Local by Stan Hieronymus, For the Love of Hops by Stan Hieronymus, and a stainless steel tumbler that doubles as a koozie. Visit homebrewersassociation.org to order. Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, December 7th, 2017. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing. This week, Chris Colby, editor of Beer and Wine Journal and author of the new book, Methods of Modern Homebrewing, joins us to talk about strategies to use unusual ingredients. Say you find something delicious that you want to integrate into a beer recipe. Where do you use it in the brewing process? Chris has some guidelines. If you go to basicbrewing.com, you can find archives of our audio and video shows, our DVDs, our brewer's logbooks, and other Basic Brewing gear. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Basic Brewing and find our show page on Facebook. We have a cool Basic Brewing app on iTunes and Amazon.com, and we're found all over the place where fine podcasts are served up. And if you do us the favor of rating us on iTunes and maybe leaving a nice comment, they say that will help new listeners find us. And thanks to everybody who's done so already. Very kind comments. If you want to support us financially, check out patreon.com/basicbrewing. And if you do so, we'll be throwing you some goodies every now and then. For example, earlier this week, Steve Wilkes and I got together to shoot a video episode where we taste the results of my Saison experiment, comparing Saf Ale T58 with Bella Saison yeast. That's a follow-up to a past episode of this podcast. Very interesting stuff. Interesting results. I'm planning to post that show to the general public on December 15th, but Patreon subscribers who pledge at the $5 per month level will get to see that a week early, along with the legacy PayPal subscribers. And I'll post the recipe that I used for all levels of Patreon subscribers, too. So thanks to everybody who's done that, who's supporting us through the Patreon thing. We're slowly but surely gaining Patreon subscribers, trying to fill that void left over from the unfeeling online retail giant cutting us off. Thanks to everybody who's helping out. That Saison experiment that I talked about used a variation of my 15-minute extract Saison recipe that you saw recently on the video podcast. I changed it up a bit to lighten up the color. Still a very tasty beer. For those not familiar with the 15-minute process, it's brewing an extract beer and only boiling for 15 minutes, because you don't need to boil longer than that to sanitize the extract. It started out with a pale ale, because you can use the 15-minute boil to really optimize, getting those hop flavors and aromas. But others have expanded it. People like Nick, who writes in, just wanted to comment on some 15-minute brews that I've done. I've done a bunch of styles as 15-minute boils, and they all came out great. ESB, Stout, Cream Ale, IPA, and Pilsner, to name a few. I think it's a great process to brew with when pressed for time. Have a young family and make 15-minute brews frequently. Thanks for sharing the process. Hope others try it too. Well, thanks to you, Nick. I appreciate your taking the time to write. Chris writes, just curious if you plan on adapting your 15-minute boils to an all-grain recipe. Obviously, you would need to mash for an appropriate time, but I know the Brewlosophy guys have looked at shorter mash times as well. Would love to see if your 15-minute pale ale recipe could be converted to an all-grain style with maybe a 30-minute mash. I guess then it would be a 45-minute pale ale. Thoughts? Well, Chris, I took your idea, and I brewed a small batch, 15-minute, all-grain, hop stand, smash American pale ale. It takes longer to say it than to brew it. I did keep the mash rest time at an hour because I didn't want to change that variable for the experiment. I have brewed pale ale that I only mashed for 30 minutes and then boiled for only 30 minutes, and it turned out really good, and it turned out kind of, very similar to a beer that had been, mashed for an hour and boiled for an hour. So I wanted to see what would happen if I mashed for an hour and then boiled for 15 minutes with all grain. So no spoilers because I'm planning on featuring it in an upcoming video episode, but it was very interesting, as R.D. Johnson used to say. I'm peeking through a shrubbery right now, or a fern. Hey, while I'm thinking about it, don't forget to send in your homebrew disaster story for our annual disaster show. I've gotten several already, but yours is better, right? You've got the one. Send your tale of homebrewing woe and probably redemption to james@basicbrewing.com by December 15th. Steve and I are going to get together and record the day after. And as usual, I'm lining up prizes for our favorite stories. The Christmas/holiday gift-giving season is upon us, and what is the most foolproof gift for homebrewers? Gift certificates. And now until the end of December, our sponsors, Desiree and Dave of High Gravity in Tulsa, are offering gift certificate bundles on highgravitybrew.com. That's right. Through the end of December, High Gravity is offering a bundling special on gift certificates. So, if you don't trust Santa to get the exact right thing, get a gift certificate and get it yourself. If you buy a $50 gift certificate, you'll get a second $5 one for free. If you buy a $100 gift certificate, you'll get a $10 one for free. And if you buy a $1,000 gift certificate, you'll get a $100 gift certificate bundled with it for free. That's through the end of December. Check out highgravitybrew.com for details. What can you buy with a $1,000 gift certificate? Maybe an electric brewing system that will make 2018 very happy indeed. Tell Santa and go shopping for your dream system at highgravitybrew.com. Thanks to Desiree and Dave for continuing to support us. We greatly, greatly appreciate that. Now, if you adhere strictly to the Reinheitsgebot, if you can say Reinheitsgebot and adhere strictly to it, this show may not be for you. But for the rest of us who want to add flavor to our beers with fun and possibly unusual ingredients, we need some guidance on when and where to use them. Well, Chris Colby is here to help. Chris Colby, welcome back to Basic Brewing Radio.
Hey, James. Thanks for having me on the show.
You've got a big event coming up. We got your book coming out on December the 12th, The Methods of Modern Homebrewing, the Comprehensive Guide to Contemporary Craft Beer Brewing.
That's what they called it, all right.
Everybody's got to have a main title and then a colon and then something else after it.
Then a catchy publisher chosen, yeah.
Can't be just like beer book.
Yeah, beer book. What to do in your garage.
So remind us, we've talked about this book before, but it's going to be out, like I say, on December 10th. It's available for pre-order right now if you want to tell Santa Claus to put that in your stocking. But tell us what the book's all about.
Yeah, the book is, as the title states, it's a methods book. I go through all the common methods in homebrewing, and these include, just things like starts with, extract brewing techniques, moves on to all grain brewing techniques, and it just covers it basically technique by technique. So there's a chapter, say, on decoction mashing. There's a chapter on krausening. There's a chapter on, basically every technique that you would use in a home brewery. And then for some of the techniques, there's an example recipe given.
Yeah, and you've got recipes. It's not just like the technical stuff up front and the recipes in the back. The recipes are scattered throughout, so that you can kind of illustrate with recipes each technique, so that you can kind of show what you're talking about.
Yeah, for example, in the chapter on decoction mashing, there's a couple recipes on that use decoction mashing as as the example, so that you can read about it, and then there right there's an example of the technique in action, so to speak.
How many recipes are in the book?
50.
Wow.
Yeah, so quite a few.
And it's a pretty book too. It's got nice pictures.
Nice pictures. Yeah, the same photographer who shot my first book came out and did this one, and yeah, the people at Page Street, which is the publisher, they did a good job on the layout and just the look of the book. It looks beautiful.
Yeah. Well, congratulations. And Tasty McDole on Twitter has endorsed it, which is that's a pretty good endorsement right there.
Oh, that's nice of him. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll go ahead and endorse it too. It's a good book. I don't have the solid form yet, but I do have the the electronical version.
I thought you could say the liquid form.
Yeah, I've pureed
it. Do wonders with computers these days.
Yeah, the pulp hasn't hardened yet, and it's just a slurry. But it is, that's what you get when you pre-order. You just get, a bowl full of book.
They printed it a little while ago because they shipped me a box of the books, and I don't know enough about publishing to know why would you print it and then wait to release it? Is it fermenting still? Is it
the ink's got to set?
The ink's got to dry or something. I don't know, but it's it exists as a physical book. They're just saying you can't have it until December the 12th.
Well, I'm sure they've got their well reasoned out, justification.
It's got to be something to do with logistics and shipping and all stuff that an author doesn't ever have to know.
Well, we're going to talk about unusual ingredients, and you and I have talked about a bunch of unusual stuff over the years, and I get the question every now and then. I want to use X ingredient in my beer. Where would you put it in the process? Should I put it in the mash? Should I put it in the boil? Should I put it in the fermenter? Should I dry pork or whatever you're going to do with it? So break it down. How do we say we got an ingredient? How do we know how to use it in the beer? Are there some rules that we can follow?
Yeah, there's a number of things you want to achieve when you put any ingredient into the beer. The first and probably the obvious is you want the flavor and the aroma of that ingredient to be, present in the profile of your beer. But you also want to make sure that whatever you're adding to the beer doesn't contaminate it. You want to make sure that whatever you're adding to the beer doesn't, additionally add weird off flavors. And, so you whenever you've got an unusual ingredient that you're trying for the first time, you want to, it's best to do some research into the ingredient, find out things basic things like what's it mostly composed of. If it's mostly starch, then the odds are you're going to want to put it in the mash, and there's a couple of different ways you might have to treat it. If it's largely sugars, then you're probably going to want to put it in the boil or maybe the fermenter, depending on a couple different things. If it's just a spice, you can add that near the end of the boil. You can add that in the fermenter, and again, there's a couple things you might want to consider when you go to each. But yeah, with any ingredient, your first step is try to find out as much as you can about what's the content of the ingredient. That'll a lot of times direct you to where in the process that goes. And then secondly, whenever possible, just try a test of it, a small scale test if possible, and it might be your first time. You might just brew like a 3-gallon batch or a 2-gallon batch of the beer itself and just try it out. Or you can even go with smaller tests. Like if you're going to put it in the boil, just try boiling a little bit of wort and adding and then tasting the wort. Like, does that boil extract, do I get the flavor that I think that I want out of it? If if it's a spice and you're planning to soak it in vodka and then add it, as an extract, try soaking it in vodka and trying a little bit, in just a few drops in a couple ounces of some other beer, see if you're getting the extraction you want. And yeah, so that's really it. Just a little bit of sort of paper research, find out what's known about the ingredient, and if possible, and depending on how adventurous you are, some people are content to I'm just going to do one batch with this, I'll just see how it works. But if you're a little more cautious, do whatever small scale tests you can before you brew a full scale beer.
So let's take each stage of the brewing process and kind of talk about what each brings to the process. For example, the mash. I mean, what does the mash do to these ingredients? And say I've got like breakfast cereal. Can I just throw that in the boil, or would you mash it first?
The mash is generally where you want to put anything that's starchy. So breakfast cereal, are typically made from grains. So the mash would be a great place to put those. They're also, a lot of them also have a lot of sugar and extraneous flavors attached. So putting it near the end of the boil might not be bad either. Although you'd risk extracting some starch and having that in your beer. Although that's not really, that's going to add some haze, but it's not really going to be a fatal error unless the beer is also contaminated. But anyway, generally starchy things should go in the mash. And then you've secondarily got to find out, either by trial and error or by trying to look it up somewhere, the temperature that the starch turns into a gel, or it doesn't actually turn into a gel, it turns it into a gel is an animal product, but a gelatin. So anything that gelatinizes below mash temperature, you can just throw right in the mash. For example, just ordinary potatoes or sweet potatoes, both, which they're not actually botanically related, or closely botanically related. But those you can throw right in the mash, and those will just stir them, and they'll dissolve. The starches will gelatinize, and then the enzymes in the mash will go to work on the starch, just as they would the starch in the barley or whatever. And so for those sort of starches, you just stir them into the mash. If the gelatinization temperature is higher than the mash, well, you've got to raise at least that part of the mash to that higher temperature for a while. Usually what people do is a cereal mash, where you boil the starch along with a handful or maybe up to 10% of barley malt, crushed barley malt. Boil that for about a half hour, and that'll gelatinize all the starches. And the barley malt in there will have started a little bit of work before they got boiling on the starches, and then dump that into your main mash. So, and that's, as most people know, that's the basis of beers that have either corn, / maize, or rice in them. Those beers they go through the cereal cooker, and then they go into the main mash. And so if you're using those two grains or some other grain that doesn't, or that has a high gelatinization temperature, or if you're using a grain and you're not sure, and you're using enough of it, go with the cereal mash. Mash the boiling ingredient with some barley malt, and then put it in the main mash.
Now, you say if you have corn and it's flaked or it's rolled, it is considered to be pre-gelatinized at that point, right? So you don't, if it's processed in a way, you don't have to do a cereal mash, right?
Right. Flaked maize of the kind they use for brewers, it's corn, and it's run through these hot rollers that sort of extrude it into a flat, a little flat sheet that we've all seen. And that the heat from that gelatinizes the temperatures, so you can just stir that straight into the mash. Yeah, that's a product that's made for the convenience of brewers. Yes.
So if you've got some unusual ingredients that would be considered adjuncts, do you have to nowadays look at the enzymatic power of your base malt to make sure that it's got enough oomph to break down those starches, those extra starches into sugars?
It really helps especially if you're brewing anything where the extra grain you're using, or the extra, if it's a root vegetable, or whatever the starch is. If you're using a substantial amount of it, like over 10% in the mash, it's good to start looking at your the diastatic power, the DP of the base malts. A nice thing, if you're using either US 6-row or 2-row, you can use up to 30 or 40% of an unmalted adjunct, something that's not going to contribute any enzymes, because the enzymatic power of both of those are very high. If you're using a continental Pilsner malt, you may be, and I mean these numbers are sort of ballpark, maybe 20%, because the diastatic power of those are a little bit lower. And then if you're using like an English pale ale malt, slightly darker than a pale malt, those are even lower, and maybe 10%. And then to be sure, if you were brewing like huge, industrial scale amounts of these beers, you'd want to do small test batches and be very, very sure of what that limit was. But as a home brewer, you can use those figures as sort of rough guesses.
And I guess if you've got a large amount of potatoes or something like that in your mash, and you want to make sure those starches are converted, would it be smart to do an iodine test at that point?
Oh, sure, yeah.
And remind us what an iodine test is.
That's exactly the test you would want to do. An iodine test is just a test where you take some of the liquid from a mash, strain out any solids, and you add a drop of iodine to, and iodophore generally works. Add a drop of iodine to the liquid solution. What happens is, if starch is present, the iodine will go attached to it, and it'll change the color of the solution to, depending on how much there is, either like a black or a purple, or if there's less, like a dark bluish color. But if there's no starch present, it just looks like the color of the sample at the beginning, plus whatever amber color that the iodine added. So it's when you're using unmalted adjuncts, and you want to make sure, the iodine test is it's cheap, it works, it's effective, and it'll tell you, at least a negative iodine test, one in which you don't see the color change to purple or black, means at least most of the starches are gone. They're gone to a degree that you don't have to worry about them brewing wise. There still might be some, but to within the limits of the test. That's going to give you a good idea of if you've degraded all the starches.
And you want to throw away the iodine after you're done with it. Don't put it back in the mash. And also don't use a paper plate, because I got an email from somebody who said he kept doing iodine tests on paper plates, and his wort would never convert, and so it was detecting the actual starch in the paper.
Yeah. Yep.
So a porcelain plate.
Use a white plate and either wash it really, really good, or better yet, just dedicate that to iodine tests.
So, what about the boil? I mean, what does the boil bring to the process that we might want to add our unusual ingredients there?
Well, one thing, the boil in general helps to sanitize the wort, and if you're dealing with something that basically you need to sanitize it, and if it can withstand the boil and not have, it's what you want to add to the beer destroyed, if it doesn't destroy the flavor or blow off all the aroma, or if it doesn't extract unwanted flavors, then you can put that ingredient in the boil. Uh, Sugary adjuncts are the main thing that people add in the boil, and that includes malt extract, honey, just plain, various types of sugar, caramelized or not. And generally with sugary adjuncts, uh, especially if they have a flavor to them, adding them right near the end of the boil is best because all you really need to do is get them dissolved. If they, boil for 30 seconds, they're sanitized, especially given, unless your sugar has, is horrendously contaminated with something that it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that big of a deal to pour, either liquid sugar out of a jar or scoop it out of a, whatever package it comes into. It should sanitize pretty much instantly in the boil. And adding it at the end is just a good way to avoid unwanted caramelization because it's easy for if you stir it into the boil just sort of raw, just pour the sugar right in there. What some of it's going to do is just form a clump and fall right to the bottom, and then it's sitting on the hot bottom of your kettle, and it can scorch pretty easily. So just as an aside, what you should do is take a small pot, scoop a little bit of hot wort out, put your sugar in there, and sort of dissolve it in the smaller pot, and then pour that back into the, you dissolve the sugar a little bit, and then it makes it easier to stir into the. And also, a lot of times people will cut the burner while they're adding any sugar, and that includes. You can also add a lot of these. When I say at the end of the boil, that includes after the boil. You can cut the heat and then stir in the sugar. While as long as it's still above 170 degrees, it'll sanitize, very quickly.
Yeah, so if you're adding spices or something like that you want to make sure that you don't boil off those volatile, fragile flavor and aroma components, but you want to make sure that they are sanitized. Could you chill the wort down to say 180 degrees Fahrenheit and hold it there, and then add your stuff at that point?
Yeah, if you have spices, you can treat them a lot like a hop stand. Cool the wort down a little bit and then just add them, and that can have a couple different benefits. For one thing, whatever essential oils they have or the volatiles, if it's below boiling and not a continued rolling boil, you're not gonna blow off as many of those as possible. Also, a lot of spices, there's not only the the oils and stuff that you want, but there's also plant material in it. And the longer you keep that in a boil, the longer the tannins and stuff from that, which you may not necessarily want, get extracted. So yeah, adding spices either right near the end of the boil or even in a whirlpool stage generally does a good idea or does a good job of extracting the things you want without over extracting the things you don't want.
And the last stage is the next last stage. I guess you can add in the packaging as well, and it's serving. But
Sure.
in the fermenter, what do we want to put in the fermenter? What's safe to put in there?
Basically, you can put anything that's not going to contaminate the beer. And one thing, or one reason people will add stuff to the fermenter rather than late in the boil is for extremely delicate flavored, or things with extremely delicate flavors or aromas that they don't want the boil to destroy. For example, a lot of people who brew fruit beers will add fruit in the secondary because or they feel at least even a short amount of contact in the boil is going to drive off the aroma.
Mm-hmm.
But you can add a lot of different things in the fermenter. You can add sugars. I mean, there's especially if you're trying to brew a very, very big beer, you can start out by brewing a normally big beer, and then sort of feed it with a little bit of sugar in the fermenter until it just sort of restart a secondary fermentation until it won't do that anymore. and to make a very strong beer. Fruits you can add. I mean, a lot of people worry about the sanitation there, but generally, when you add fruits, I mean, I've come to believe from reading a very certain amount of things they actually do contaminate the beer, but generally they don't to the extent that it's ruined.
Hmm.
Uh, the old saying was like, it used to be like, as with dry hopping, which is also added in the fermenter, oh, the beer doesn't get contaminated with that. But some stuff I've read recently on adding weird ingredients indicates that the people who sort of do the tests, in breweries that add weird stuff do find, small amounts of contamination. But anyway, it's below, below the level that it's going to negatively impact the flavor of beer. And also in beer, a lot of times those contaminants aren't going to be able to grow much.
Hmm.
So yeah, and spices are another thing. You can add spices directly to the fermenter, and for the same reason as fruits. If you want, if you really want all that aroma, and some of that flavor, but not want to extract, or not want to lose volatiles from boiling it, and not want to extract tannins and stuff, you can make a quick boiling water extract, or you can boil a small amount of water, or even a small amount of water with a little bit of malt extract in it, so very dilute work. Yeah, boil that quickly, cool it down, and then use that as a tincture sort of to treat your main beer. Or you can use like vodka or Everclear, and just let the ingredients soak in that for a little while. The solubility of different things, is going to be different in water and alcohol. So if there's a particular spice that you use over and over, it might help you to make both an alcohol extract and a water extract, and try, doctoring a couple beers with both of those and see if there's one that you prefer.
And I know that, ingredients like hot peppers, those work really well with, say, a neutral spirit tincture, or an extract. And the advantage to that is you can add as much of the solution that comes from the ingredient into the beer and kind of taste it, at bottling or packaging time. Whereas if you were to just dangle the that ingredient in, say, a fermenter in a bag of some sort, you're kind of, it's less controlled, because once it's too much, then it's too much.
Yeah, that's one of the nice things about making either a boiling water extract or an alcohol extract, is that you can then take your extract that you've made. You can do a bench trial with just take some beers that you have, figure out how much do I add to get the level of flavor I want, and then scale that up for your entire batch. Which is another reason that if you had an ingredient that you could add either at the end of the boil or in the fermenter, you might want to think about, can I make a nice extract from this? And some things it's easy to make a very strong extract, and that's good from a brewing standpoint. Other things are harder, which is bad, simply because then you have to add more of that extract to your beer, which dilutes it, which you have to then go back and adjust your recipe to account for that and all that. But if you can make if you have some ingredient and you're trying to decide between the boil and the fermenter, see if you can make a nice strong extract that tastes good, and then if so, go with the fermenter route.
And then, like we said, there's also serving time. If you have a Randall or something like that, or if you want to pitch ingredient right there into the keg to serve, that's another place where you can put, especially something that is really delicate in flavor. You can just run the beer over it or through it, and just add it at serving.
Sure. And another interesting thing is if you bottle your beer, if you bottle condition, That can be a time to, if you got a small amount of some sort of flavored sugar adjunct, that can be a good time to add it, because use that as your bottling sugar,
Hmm.
and whatever flavor it has is going to be sort of relatively intense compared to if you would add it into the boil, because it's trapped in the bottle. It doesn't, whatever would normally either boil out and later be bubbled out by fermentation is trapped in there. So adding things at bottling can be good, or it can be dangerous, because you can get just way too much of that flavor in there.
Yeah. And you want to make sure that you do your research on how much sugar is involved in each ingredient, so that you don't overprime your bottles and have bottle bombs. That's never fun. Now there are ingredients that I have heard go into all of the categories that we have talked about, like coffee. We've done a talk about coffee, and people add coffee in the mash, they add coffee in the boil, they add coffee in the fermenter, they, all the way through. And I've heard the same thing about coconut. So there are some ingredients that you may want to play with and add several times during the process.
Sure, coffee's that way. Chocolate, people add cacao nibs, or other forms of chocolate at various times, and they all work to some degree. Another interesting ingredient that way is black patent malt. You wouldn't think about this, but most malts are pretty much crawling with bacteria or whatever, because they're made by, you take the grains and you steep them for a while, and then you drain the water and let it sit for a while, then you add more water and let it, and so in all the mashing water, like the lactobacillus bacteria and other bacteria that live on or around grains are multiplied. And then in the pale malts, the malt is kilned a little bit, which knocks the numbers down, but they still have, quite a bit of, especially, lactic acid bacteria on the outside of them. But black patent malt and some of the other very dark malts, when they're done kilning, they're sterile at that point. I mean, they aren't packaged sterile, but they're packaged at that point. And so you think of black patent malt, or I think of black patent malt, as primarily as something, you grind it up and put it in the mash. But you can, and there are commercial brewers that do, add it in the boil right at the end of the boil, mostly for color adjustments. And same thing, they'll add it in the fermenter, which a lot of people don't know. And then, of course, the same thing happens with there are coloring agents that are made from the very dark malts, and they're handled exactly the same way. They can be added to the boil or in the fermenter.
And we've done some taste tests with the different, specialty malts and specialty grains here, and black patent is not as acrid and roasty as you might imagine it is. It's actually a little bit sweeter.
Yeah, a black patent malt pretty much is completely misunderstood. If you read the homebrewing literature and what people say about it, for example, you'll see people describe it as acrid or burnt, and it's not. Acrid and burnt are things that describe something that's been combusted, and unless something's gone horribly wrong at the maltster, your black patent malt was never on fire. It was roasted, extremely, but it's not. It may have flavors that you find. I mean, I actually think it's a pretty neutral, darkly roasted ingredient, but it might have flavors that some people think of as sharp, but it's not. Saying acrid or burnt is the wrong. There's the wrong word for it.
Mm-hmm. Well, very cool. I think these are some pretty solid and, when you think about it, common sense guidelines. A lot of times when you start thinking about formulating recipes or working with new ingredients, it's kind of confusing, and then you get on the internet and you look at message boards, and it's more confusing still because everybody's got a different opinion. But if you take a listen to these rules and apply them and do some experiments, playing with unusual ingredients can be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, generally, if there's an ingredient that you're really interested in brewing with, getting a good recipe from it is really just a two or three step process. Do some research onto the nature of the ingredient, do a small scale test or two, and then maybe brew it once at whatever full scale is for you, 5 gallons, 10 gallons. And then taste it, and then you should be able to tweak it, and the next one should be pretty much right what you want.
There you go. Methods of Modern Homebrewing, the comprehensive guide to contemporary craft beer brewing, hitting the stands on December 12th. Pre-order yours today, or wait outside with everybody else at the bookstore on December 12th.
That's the huge hordes of people. It's like the iPhone. People will be lining up.
That's right.
Sleeping overnight. This is a line for Harry Potter? No, this is a line for the homebrewing book.
Well, one day in our minds.
Yeah, one day in our minds. Homebrewing will be that popular.
There you go. All right, Chris, if I don't talk to you before then, have a happy new year.
Yeah, you too. Have a great, holiday season. And I'll definitely be seeing you in what should we call it? 2018?
Yeah, let's go with that.
Let's go with that.
Thanks, Chris.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks again to Chris. His book, Methods of Modern Homebrewing, goes on sale December 12th. I think in the interview I said the 10th one time, but it's the December 12th, he says. You can pre-order it now, though. It's a very slick publication full of useful information and fun recipes. Don't forget about the free gift that you can get for signing up for the American Homebrewers Association and the gift certificate bundles from highdgravitybrew.com that we talked about earlier. We meaning me. If you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say howdy, or if you want to send in your disaster show story, write to James at basicbrewing.com or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com, and please don't forget to tell us where you're from. Thanks to everybody supporting us through our Patreon page. Special goodies coming your way. Check that out at patreon.com/basicbrewing. Be sure to check out our DVDs, Extract Brewing and Partial Mashing, Stepping into All Grain, Low-Tech Lagering and Decoction Mashing, and Introduction to Wine Kits. You can find them all on our site. You get a free Basic Brewing bottle opener with any DVD combo. You can check out our Basic Brewing shirts in the store as well. You can find our logbooks where you can track and log up to 50 batches of beer. Those make excellent stocking stoppers. They don't make stoppers. Check all those out at basicbrewingshop.com. And don't forget you can join the American Homebrewers Association or subscribe to Brew Your Own magazine through the associate links on basicbrewing.com. So until next time, until then, thanks for listening, everybody. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dotson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time, everybody. So long.